Stephen Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today, we'll be talking about open educational resources. Candace Till is director of the Open Learning Initiative at Carnegie Mellon University. She is also co-director of OLNet, an international open educational research network. Stephen Carson is the External Relations Director for MIT's OpenCourseware. He is a former president of the OpenCourseware Consortium. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, maybe if we could just start with what is an open educational resource and what are open educational resources?
Okay, well, very simply, there are a wide range of materials that are used for teaching. The stuff that you expect to receive if you're sitting in a classroom: textbooks, syllabi, lecture notes, journal articles, all of the materials that are probably familiar to most students. And the internet allows us to share those materials very widely and at very low cost. And so open educational resources are simply those materials, the stuff that's used for teaching, that has an open license applied to it. That open license allows people to download, redistribute, in some cases modify the materials for their own use. So it's a way of sharing educational resources across the internet at very low cost.
And at the Open Learning Initiative, we celebrate the open educational resources idea and decided to take it a little bit further, which is to say if the goal is to provide a high quality education to folks who don't have access, then providing more than material could help facilitate that. So rather than simply putting the materials that support the traditional instruction at Carnegie Mellon on the web, we brought together teams of faculty domain experts, learning science researchers, software engineers, and others to think about how do we create a web-based environment that would support learners any place in the world to achieve the learning outcomes that would be expected of the learner in that class at Carnegie Mellon.
So let's assume that I'm a student somewhere in Central Africa, and I decide that I'm interested in taking a course at Carnegie Mellon. How would I do that?
So you wouldn't actually be taking a course at Carnegie Mellon, just as with MIT OCW, you wouldn't actually be taking a course at MIT. Steve can speak to what you would get, what part of an MIT course you would get through OCW. What I can say is with the Open Learning Initiative, what you would do is, let's say you just by gum want to learn statistics, because we all know that's a natural human drive to want to learn statistics. So if you wanted to learn statistics, you would go to the OLI website, you would find the statistics course listed on the site, you would click into it, and then just begin to learn. And the OLI materials actually have built-in activities, structure to guide you through the learning of statistics.
How would anyone else know that you would learn that material?
So the OLI, and this is also true for, I believe, OCW, we don't currently give credit for completing an OLI course. Our project is really to support independent learners who just want to learn statistics because you want to learn statistics. We do have arrangements with many institutions around the world that you can get credit for taking the OLI course, but you would get it from one of those partner institutions, not from Carnegie Mellon.
Now, the experience of a student in Africa using MIT OpenCourseware materials would probably be different because MIT OpenCourseware materials are not designed to be online learning materials. We're not trying to create an online learning environment. What we're doing is we're sharing the byproducts of campus-based teaching, and those can be used in a variety of different ways. I think it's important, to think of them as an infrastructure rather than as a single offering. So our materials are frequently downloaded by educators in developing world contexts, and they take those materials, they reshape them, and then they use them in their own classrooms. And so what you get is not direct use of the materials, but the student encounters the materials as part of their instruction in the school that they're attending in that region, and it helps to raise the quality of the instruction in that region. We also distribute our materials on hard drives to universities in developing regions, so it acts as a library resource. Many of these schools don't have very good access to the internet, but if you take a hard drive with our entire site, all 2,100 courses, and put it in their library or on their local area network, which is typically very fast, then the entire community can access this very rich educational resources for a whole variety of purposes, including independent study, but also creating new classroom-based experiences, and just as a general reference.
Yeah, the OLI courses are also used largely in institutions in the US to support the traditional instruction. And often how faculty will use those materials is in place of a textbook, so that the students are working through the OLI course, they're getting feedback and support as they're working through the material. But the other thing that's happening, and we can talk more about this later, is the system is collecting the interaction level detail about the students' learning activities to give that information in a really robust way to the instructor. So the instructor has much better insight into their students' knowledge state and can make decisions about how they want to spend their class time.
But I guess I'm a little confused here. So let's assume, let's take a student at the University of Cape Town. We just did a segment and we had two terrific guests from Cape Town, who
Sure.
are originally from Cape Town. And let's assume that they were here right now and they had some students who were at the University of Cape Town.
Okay.
So if a student from the University of Cape Town is interested in taking advantage of these materials,
Sure.
is a student from UCT paying any money at all to the United States for the materials that you're providing? And or how is it affecting their day-to-day learning in their class?
You want me to go
Okay,
first?
sure. I'll take this one first.
And then
About 42% of the use of our materials is from students at other universities. And so typically, if they're taking a physics class at their university, they're struggling with some of the concepts in that course, they can come over to our site, they can look at the materials, they can perhaps watch video lectures from an MIT classroom and get a second explanation of the concept that they're struggling with. And we get hundreds of emails every year from students around the world who say, this site helped me to pass my physics course or to pass my math course. And so it's a supplementary resource that helps to provide additional instruction for students around the world.
So it's almost like it's essentially a tutoring service in some ways for students in other universities.
It's supplementary resources. I wouldn't want to characterize it as tutoring because there's no interpersonal interaction. You don't actually connect with anybody on the MIT campus. There's no access to the MIT faculty. But it's additional resources that can help you understand materials.
But in the Carnegie Mellon Institute, I thought you mentioned a moment ago that there was that you're essentially learning from learning, and is there any interaction back and forth in terms of how a student is going to be learning?
Absolutely. So when we structure the OLI courses, because we were designing them originally to support independent learners that didn't have the benefit of an instructor. So we brought together our learning researchers and the domain experts and the software engineers to look at how do we construct interactive learning activities in the web-based environment so that the learners are being supported in their learning. And this is based on the work we've been doing at Carnegie Mellon for the last 15 years on cognitive tutoring. And cognitive tutors are basically pieces of software that act like a good human tutor. When a student is trying to work through a problem, they can, and they make a move, they can get immediate feedback from the software. If they're stuck, they can ask for a hint and get support. And if they're working through the problem just fine, the software just hangs back and observes them. So it's not as good as a human tutor, but what we're trying to do is see if we can scale that kind of support for many, many, many learners. The advantage, so you're a student in Cape Town, they could either be using the OLI course as a supplement, just as the OCW materials, whether or not their instructor recommended that they use the materials, and no, they pay nothing. Or the instructor could say, I want my students in the class to use the OLI course to support what I'm doing in class. And then that instructor could create an instance of an OLI course for just his or her students. And as the students are interacting with the OLI course, they're getting the hints and feedback and support. But the other thing that's happening is the system is collecting all of those interactions to give that instructor what we call the instructor dashboard, which gives them just-in-time information about their learners' knowledge states. So they can see, for example, where I'm trying to teach the students how to do a data analysis. And I can see by looking at the instructor dashboard that my students get how to make a histogram. That's not a problem. But when it comes to interpreting what the skew of a histogram means or what that's telling them about the data, they're really struggling with that. So with that information, I can then decide when I spend this very precious class time with my students that that's where I'm going to focus my attention.
And if I was a matriculated student at Carnegie Mellon,
Yes.
would I be getting this from all my classes at Carnegie Mellon?
Not all the classes, but the classes for which we have done OLI courses, yes. Which is kind of funny because when we started this project back in 2002, we did it as an open educational resources project. And so when I went around to the various departments asking, would you participate in creating these resources to give to the world, everybody was supportive of the OER mission. And they were all, yes, let's do that. But let's be clear, Candace, these courses are for us to give to the world. They won't be used here at Carnegie Mellon. And I said, fine, that's fine. Now, every single one of the OLI courses is used to support instruction at Carnegie Mellon. And every day I have more faculty coming saying, how do we use this resource? How do we put our courses in OLI?
Are professors afraid of their materials just being distributed throughout the world without any control over the materials?
Well, they don't have, both in OCW and in OLI, it's not that they're being distributed throughout the world without any control. We give them the option of using a Creative Commons license. And what a Creative Commons license is, it used to be that people who created things only had two choices. They could either fully copyright, meaning all their rights were reserved, or they could put things in the public domain, which means they lost all rights. And what Creative Commons did was construct a series of legal licensing agreements that allow the creator to make different choices about what rights they want to preserve and what rights they want to give away. So by selecting different Creative Commons licenses, the faculty can decide how much of their rights they want to preserve and how much they want to give away.
For instance, with the MIT OpenCourseware materials, we allow people to download, redistribute, and modify our materials, but there are 3 restrictions. One of the restrictions is that they have to cite MIT and the professor as the author of the materials, so there's an attribution requirement. They're not allowed to use the materials for commercial gain, so there's a non-commercial requirement. And there's also a share-alike requirement, which says if you create a derivative work, that derivative work also has to carry the same license with it. So these materials can travel very widely, and from a technical perspective too, our content is mostly in PDFs, and so can be printed out and even distributed widely offline as well. And it's really interesting to see the way that non-commercial license or that Creative Commons license works, because we have such a big following around the world. We estimate that about 125 million people in total have accessed our content since we started 10 years ago.
Did you say 125 million?
125 million. There are so many people out there that know our content that they actually email us when they come across violations of our license and say to us, hey, you need to check up on this or that use of the material. I got an email not too long ago from a student in Cameroon that said, hey, there's a university over here that's saying it's offering degrees in partnership with MIT using your materials. And so we called our counsel's office and they sent a letter and they stopped doing that. And so the licenses have their own mechanism for enforcing themselves.
This is interesting. This is very interesting. So in terms of the credits, though, if we can get back to the credits. So you both alluded to the fact, if I understood you correctly, that if I'm taking that class from Cape Town, I'm not getting an MIT degree and I'm not getting a Carnegie Mellon degree.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Who's giving credit for this? What are the institutions that are giving credit? Of which institutions, which traditional institutions are giving credit for courses like these?
So in the OLI case, that's on a course-by-course basis, it's an individual institution, actually faculty decision. So the way the OLI materials are traditionally used is we don't, unlike many of the MOOCs, we don't make an institutional agreement between Carnegie Mellon and some university to offer credit. Instead, individual faculty make the decision that I want to use the OLI course to support my teaching. So the credit that the student is getting is the credit that they're getting for taking that faculty member's course at that institution. And there are, last year with our statistics course, there were 60 different institutions, if you will, that were offering credit for that hybrid course.
But the student was still paying tuition to their home
To
institution.
their home institution. That's correct.
And with MIT OpenCourseware, again, we're not offering courses, we're offering materials, and those materials are used in a wide variety of educational offerings at other universities and high schools around the world that do carry credit with them, but it's the ordinary credit you get by going through that program. We've identified a couple of instances, one in India and one in the United States, where students have done directed studies using our material, supervised by faculty at their own institution, and gotten credit. And we've also seen a number of high schools in the United States who can't offer AP courses. They just don't have the capacity. But they use our courses, again, to do directed studies so that their instructors supervise the use of the materials and can look at the exams when the students have taken the exams and score them, but they don't offer the actual instruction.
But if a student is going to do this, I guess I'm kind of interested in this issue of how can we use these tremendous resources to save money on the part of the student or the institution. Where's the cost savings? Am I missing something, or who's saving money where?
Well, cost savings is a difficult question to address with a broad topic like open educational resources. There are some clear areas within open educational resources where we're going to see cost savings. The first one I would point to is open textbooks. Textbooks have become a tremendous burden on students in the United States. In many cases, community colleges students spend more on their textbooks than they actually spend on tuition for their courses. Now, there are a number of publishers out there who are publishing free and open textbooks. And so I would expect that within the next 5 years, you're going to be able to get the textbook for any one of the sort of 25 major introductory courses completely free online at very high quality. So that's one example of where there's likely going to be cost savings. With MIT OpenCourseware, we're providing the course content, syllabi, lecture notes, exams, quizzes. I don't think you're going to see cost savings in there because there's not really a cost burden in there. What you're going to see is improvements in quality through the sharing of these materials. There are some other places where we might begin to see cost savings. If you have an educational resource like OLI that's truly scalable and you can move more students through it, yes, we need to figure out how to offer credit for that, and I think that's the next step and the challenge for the open education community. But I do think you can begin to see savings there.
So we have done a number of, we're looking at trying to solve in some ways that I guess the iron triangle. How do you provide better access? How do you keep quality high? How do you achieve attainment and reduce cost? And that is, now that we've moved into supporting traditional institutions, one of the things we're really looking at with our OLI material. And there are a number of ways you could look at cost savings. One of them is students don't have to repeat the course as frequently. If they can learn it the first time, that's an immediate savings, both to the institution and to the individual learner. As Steve mentioned, the OLI courses have all the material that you need. You don't need to buy a textbook anymore. So using the OLI course instead of the $150 statistics textbook, say, there's a cost savings there immediately. Then there have been a couple of interesting studies that have been done on the use of the OLI courses, which also point to some other areas of potential cost savings. One of them was a set of studies that we did at Carnegie Mellon, where we looked at could we accelerate learning by using the OLI courses. And we have published papers that I'd be happy to give you on this, but we were able to demonstrate that students using the OLI course in collaboration with an instructor could achieve the same learning outcomes as the students in traditional instruction in half the time with half the number of instructor contact hours during that half time. So really a quarter of the instructor contact hours. So you can see that in those ways, you could really start to achieve some efficiency. The Ithaca Foundation under Bill Bowen just recently conducted similar studies using the OLI statistics course in large public systems in the state of Maryland, actually, and New York, and was able to show also that students using the OLI courses in conjunction with an instructor could achieve the same or better learning outcomes with much fewer instructor contact hours.
How would this extend to the MOOCs? You mentioned MOOCs before, which I believe stands for Massive Online Courses. Am I getting that?
Oh, except for you forgot the really important letter, which is O, open. Open. Massively open online courses. Yeah, or else you just have mock.
So we'll talk about the MOOCs, not the mocks. How is that different from OLI?
Well, in many ways, actually. Most of the MOOCs are, and it's interesting because I was just with several of the big MOOC providers yesterday at the Department of Education meeting, and I was talking with them about some of the differences. One of the things that we started with OLI is we were really thinking about how do you support a novice learner, a learner who doesn't have already a lot of really good learning skills, but really wants to learn this introductory level course. And we brought to bear what we know from the learning sciences. Now, the learning sciences are the study of human learning. So we bring together the results from those who study human learning, along with the faculty content experts, to say, how do we construct an environment that's going to support a learner who maybe struggles in traditional instruction to really achieve the learning outcomes, to really learn. And all of our designs are really targeted at supporting that novice learner. With the MOOCs, it's more taking the traditional instruction, often recording lectures, maybe some activities, but they're not designed to support novice learners, and they're not tracking what the learner is actually doing in the online environment. So the MOOCs may get 120,000 learners, but only fewer than 10% of those learners actually complete the course. So they're not really targeting. I really wonder about the other 90% of the learners that attempted to learn and weren't able to be supported. I don't know what you want to say about MOOCs. I mean, I think MOOCs are really interesting, and I think that they could really help move the action forward if they were constructing the learning experiences based on what we already know about human learning, instead of just saying, this is how I've always taught it, so I'll just teach it this way. And also if they were using the power of the web to collect the data to figure out how to make the MOOCs better and better and better to serve a wide population. Then I think MOOCs could be a really exciting development. And I'm talking with the MOOC folks to try and get them to move more in that direction.
I do think it's going to be an interesting 10 years for education, and the MOOCs are going to play a big part of it. Now, when most people talk about MOOCs, they talk as if it is one type of offering. It's really not. It's a collection of practices, and those practices are focused on scaling up education in a very dramatic way. If you think of what the internet has to offer education, there's a couple of things. One is synchronicity. It allows you to offer courses asynchronously, so people don't have to be online at the same time. It offers you the possibility to teach across distance, and that's what we've been able to do also with distance learning. But one of the things the internet offers, the opportunity to scale up, really hasn't impacted education until very, very recently. Now, MIT OpenCourseware has taken advantage of the scaling opportunities of the internet, but only around content. If you think of education as a complete offering, it's really content. It's some interactive experience with other learners and instructors, and it's an assessment of that learning so you understand how much that you've learned. And we're beginning to see, in addition to content scaling up, now we're beginning to see interactions using Web 2.0 tools, and we're beginning to see assessments using some of the adaptive learning strategies and AI, artificial intelligence technologies, scale up as well. Is it being done perfectly? No, but it's dramatic in the result. We're beginning to see, so only 10% of the people got through the artificial intelligence class that was the first of these to garner a large amount of attention. But at the same time, that's more computer science students than Stanford has taught in its entire history that completed that course. It was, I don't remember the exact number, it was a couple thousand. Yeah. So it's pretty dramatic what can be done with these courses.
And I want to add on that, because all those powers of the technology, which Steve mentioned, are all true. But there's one real power of this technology that I think is really the answer. And it's what Netflix has figured out. It's what Amazon has figured out. The power of this technology is not just pushing information out, but pushing it out just far enough where the learner is interacting with the technology, so we can use the technology as a big data collector. And Amazon, Netflix, they're all using the big data collector to understand us better as consumers. We're using that same function to understand us better as learners, so that we can provide both the individual learner at any given point in time, so that we can think about what's going to support that learner better, but also learners in general. so that we can use the information to continuously design better and better learning experiences that'll move more and more learners forward.
But you raise an interesting question. I wonder if Amazon or YouTube could essentially become a university like MIT or like Carnegie Mellon. If Amazon, when my book came out, I remember being amazed at how my book would, if you looked at my book, you would also see other books that were kind of like it. So Amazon learned from that. But why couldn't Amazon provide courses, just like MIT does or Carnegie Mellon does, or any other university does?
Well, I think it's interesting. Amazon actually is involved with some of the MOOC players, but it's involved at the level of providing cloud infrastructure. So if you think of the internet, I mean, it's just layers and layers and layers of infrastructure that have built up over time. And one of the technical layers is this cloud infrastructure. On top of that, you have other infrastructures. I consider OpenCourseware to be one of those infrastructures, and that infrastructure can be deployed by others to create learning experiences. Peer-to-Peer University is offering a course that's a variant of MOOCs that actually uses content from our site. It uses another learning site called OpenStudy, and it uses a site called Codecademy, which has interactive exercises. So you get all three of the components that make up the educational experience, but they're not all on one site. And so what I think you're going to see is, yes, some of these players will have a role, but that role is going to interact with other layers of infrastructure. And I actually think the campus-based environment is an important piece of the infrastructure as well. None of these MOOCs would exist without campuses, without places where research is done, where people interact in person and talk in person and create learning experiences in person and do the research into learning theory in person. All of that is an important infrastructure for creating this layer of internet-free offerings.
Anything you want to add? Because we're going to have to wrap up in just a moment.
Okay,
Candace.
yeah, I would say that what's important is not to have the conversation go to, are the online resources that Steve and I are creating, are they trying to replace faculty or replace the traditional institution? That's not our goal. Our goal is to look at, if you think about creating a learning experience, there are multiple resources we have to bring to bear. We have what a student can do with a computer, we have what students do with their peers, and then the very precious resource of the student-faculty interaction. And what we're looking at is, how do you use each of those resources to best effect, so that we can take that really precious faculty-student interaction and use it most effectively.
Terrific. Well, thank you both for your insights today. If you would like additional information about Candace Till or Stephen Carson, please visit oli.cmu.edu or ocw.mit.edu. Let me say that again, ocw.mit.edu. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Stephen Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.